Hi, everyone. I see 2 people are in the meeting already. Can you hear me? Are you calling in? Are you on phones? Are you just not using your video? Oh yeah, anything's fine. It's fine. Oh, we had standby. So who do we have in here? You can put in the Zoom chat. Because I just see Q, DJ, and standby. Ah, okay. Is it Q like actual, like? Hey, Bobby.
Hey now. Let me put this behind the rubber bands.
Oh, I know that face.
I got my MRDA champs announcer jacket going.
Oh, yeah, look at you.
The JRTA Board of Executives got me a 500 pin for my 500th call, even though it wasn't a juniors game. I'm very touched. Yes.
That's awesome. I did my hair and put in my contacts.
Nice. Oh, I didn't even look at my hair. Do I look okay?
So we're gonna wait to start the actual thing until probably about 5 after, just to make sure everyone can get in.
Yep.
For everyone that's here, what I'm gonna do in theory, if I can figure it out. Yeah, when Bobby actually starts, I'm going to make sure everyone's muted, just so that way we don't any extra sounds on the recording.
Okay.
And then I'll just unmute people when question and answer. And then there's also the chat box, so the people without mics, if you have questions for Bobby, you can just put them over there.
Excellent. And I'm going to break at every page in the outline for questions.
Yeah.
Wow. You really squared the pitch on this one. I beg your pardon. Well, if you had just accepted my application instead of extorting me, you would have gotten 10 times that.
You right now. Haha. Yeah, so I'm gonna be muting people by default.
Okay.
And then if you want to unmute yourself to say something, absolutely you can. So that,
Do I need to do that?
Nope, you are fine. You stay unmuted because you need to talk.
Gotcha.
Yeah, if anyone wants to unmute to chat with us right now while we're waiting, you are more than welcome. Or as usual, just use the typey bits. I don't know if you have chat options from the cell phone. It's been a second since I've used Zoom on the phone.
I do not. All I have is picture.
Cool. So, Bobby, I will just relay to you. Producing for the producer today.
Yay.
It's my job.
Put that on your resume.
I've got all my cool. Let's see.
Is it still just the 2 of us?
Right now, it's just you and me, and that are talking. We've got a handful of other people already on.
Oh, great. Welcome.
Yeah. So we'll wait a couple more minutes to get started. And then we'll get going. And this is being recorded. So I'm recording right now, actually. just to make sure I don't mess it up. And it will get posted to our YouTube page afterwards. So if you guys folks have anyone that wanted to learn about producing, you can just give them the YouTube link. Also, we are going to be doing this every month. We're trying to figure out what next month's topic will be. But next month, I believe it's Saturday, December 7th. Yes, at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Will be. I don't know what the topic will be.
Yeah, if there's topics you want to learn about, go to the Facebook page for the AFTDA and just suggest topics, and we'd be glad for the input.
Yeah, I had a little poll that I put into one of the announcer groups earlier this month. So if nothing else, I'll go back to that and see what else everyone seemed excited about. Everyone was so overwhelmingly in favor of this topic that we couldn't ignore it for our first one. Hello, we just had someone call in, so that's neat.
I see a little blue phone.
Yeah. Who is this?
This is Johnny Pepper.
Oh, hi, Pepper.
Pepper!
Cool. We're going to wait just 1 or 2 more minutes. And Pepper, just so you know, I'm going to mute you during the actual meeting. And then when there's the question portion, I'm going to unmute people. Cool?
No worries. No worries. I'm driving to an event right now, so.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out a time that like most of us would not be in Derby. I forgot that there are some places in the world where they actually do Derby stuff like at normal times,
Right.
like the late night games and such. So that's the other reason why we wanted to record this. So, all right. So I'm gonna mute everyone. Most of you are already muted, and we're gonna get going here. So, welcome. Welcome to the AFTDA webinar series produced by me, hosted by Bobby Narco, who is one of the most prolific producers that roller derby has right now, I would say. When I've talked to people in the past, they've always put Bobby as one of their like top 3 people that they love to have produce for them. And I know, having announced once or twice with you, I concur. So I think that, especially as one of AFTDA's member at larges, this was an excellent choice to have you host this first one, Bobby. Before we get started in the meeting, I'll put the thing back up in a second. Can you just give everyone a little bit of background of who you are, where you come from, what your background is?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I am Bobby Narco. I started announcing roller derby in 2011. I was a national anthem singer, and the announcer didn't show up. And they said, well, you're holding the mic, you know the rules. Why don't you call a game? And I had wanted to call games for years prior to that, so I didn't hesitate at all. That was back in January of 2011. This year, I called my 500th game at Thin Air Throwdown. I did some tallies. I have produced exactly 80 bouts games in my career. And of those, 50 of them have been broadcasts. I think it's much more common to have a producer on a broadcast than it is to have a house call. But I am going to try and cover both house and broadcast production in this. I'm also going to try and do tournaments versus individual games, or doubleheader kind of stuff. So I'm going to try and be as comprehensive about the role of the producer in as many different scenarios as we can. Anything else before we get started?
No, let's. So why don't you talk about what your first section of things, and we'll get rolling.
Sure.
I'm just gonna take your cues on when to bring
Right.
stuff.
So the role of producer is relatively new to roller derby announcing. When I started announcing in 2011, I didn't get to do any producing. I hadn't really heard of the producer role until Midwest Brouhaha in 2015. And Val Capone was very big on stat tracking and have someone who was there to communicate information to the broadcast announcers about what's going on statistically in the game. From a sports fan's perspective, it adds a lot of interest. Oh, that's that's 14 lead jams in a row. Oh, that just broke a streak of 12 straight lead jams that Gotham had been on. I think that it's okay to be intimidated by it because it's so new. It didn't really it's only been around in existence for a few years. And when it first came up, people were like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know what it takes. I don't know if I have the ability to just track stats. I don't know if I have the ability to be a good producer. And I'm here to tell you that you can, and here's the way to do it, and the way that some of the things that I've found to succeed in doing it. Before you even get to your game or your tournament, you want to do some research about the teams that are going to be participating. And the best way to do that is to go to the host website. If the teams are WFTDA teams, if they're MRDA teams, if they're JRDA teams, go to those team websites. You can also go to the league sites. Most of those teams have information. Most of the league sites, WFTDA.com, will have information about WFTDA teams. You can look at the team websites, look at the team's social media. A lot of these teams have Wikipedia pages that you can garner information from. And of course, there's always flat track stats. And don't forget, if you've called or seen these teams yourself, if you have some familiarity, especially if you have prior status sheets, that's a good way to be up to date on what you've seen them in the past. They've had a 4-jammer rotation relying heavily on so-and-so, and that's all historical research that you've seen and done yourself, you know, from your prior stat sheets. We'll talk about stat sheets a little bit more. When you're doing the team research, I want you to be looking for what they've done in the past year in terms of their win and loss record, how they've done against the other teams that their team or teams that they're going to be competing against. If it's a tournament, then there's going to be multiple teams. If it's just a one-off game, then it's going to be Team A versus Team B. And you can get that. A great place to go for that is Flat Track Stats. The official record for WFTDA teams will be the WFTDA site. And there are definitely things, all of these websites have their limitations. Definitely things from Flat Track Stats that are not official games that you'll find. Like Gotham played Philly this year and Gotham played Montreal this year. You won't find those games on the WFTDA site because they weren't WFTDA sanctioned games. But you will find the outcomes on Flat Track Stats. So just be mindful of who's sponsoring the tournament and what information you're using, and be very clear about where you're getting the information. But look for won-loss records. Look for simple things like when the team was founded, when their first bout was, anything that could add color to the broadcast. What colors they skate in. Is there any significance to the colors that they've selected? And pink and black are kind of the Florida websites. And so Tampa sports pink and black. You know, often the colors that a team selects will have significance. You can get that from the team websites. You can get that from Wikipedia. There's all kinds of sources. You could also, the team have social media pages. You can check there as well. All that stuff that you're doing for team research, you can also do about the tournament. How long has this tournament been in existence? And you can get that information off of the league websites. You can also get it off of the host league websites. Something like ECDX has been around for a long time, the East Coast Derby Extravaganza, or something like the Big O. There's long histories to those tournaments, and you can find them. Other tournaments have shorter histories. The B Team Champs, this is only the 5th year that there's been B Team Champs. So if you go to B Team Champs, it would be fairly easy to find all the information from the prior years and assemble that all on one page. Sources for those, again, Wikipedia, Flat Track Stats, and your own anecdotal experience. This is my 3rd ECDX, or this is my 10th ECDX, however many you've announced. That's also kind of color that you can bring and give some background. Even as the producer, you can give that background to the announcers that are on the mic. All of this research that you're doing in terms of producing is translatable to games that you're actually calling. My favorite kinds of tournaments are where you get a blend of calls, where you get to blend a house call where you get to blend a broadcast, where you get to be a house producer, where you get to be a broadcast producer, sometimes even doing some MC work or some post-game interviews. I like the kind of tournament and the kind of tournament head announcer who wants to give everybody a broad base of experience. And then the last thing before the tournament, you can research the officials. Often you're not going to even know who they are, but sometimes especially if it's a tournament, there will be an announcement as to who the officials are going to be, and then just go through the same sort of sources, internet sources, league websites, team websites. Use the official social media, but be careful. Don't put anything. If they put it on social media, but they've limited who they're showing it to, probably not a good idea to share. Also, anecdotal experience. As long as it's okay with the person. An example like that I'll give is this year at La Classique, Georgia W. Tush, kilt got taken, stolen, misplaced. It was not where it was supposed to be. People looked all over and down. And so he had a good sense of humor about that. In the next tournament, he showed up, I think it was junior champs maybe. He showed up as kilt stripped, wearing just regular shorts. And it was the first time I'd seen kilt strip without that, but it was okay. We got permission from him. He had a good sense of humor about it to talk about that on the broadcast, how, there's color to the officials as well. You can always enhance your broadcast, whether or not it's about the skaters, about the teams, or about the tournament itself. Any questions about that before we go on to page 2 of the outline? Anyone? Mary Chaos, are you out there?
No questions.
All right, then let's continue on. Want to emphasize that you're part of a team, that the producer is every bit an announcer and is part of the announcing team. The producer doesn't have a microphone, but you're part of the announcing team. You're a partner with the announcing team. Those are your teammates. You are there to support them, but they are there to support you as well. You can work as a team, and there's a lot of stuff that you have to do before the bout, and it's very good if you can delegate some of that with your fellow announcers. First thing that you want to do is obviously be at your post on time. It is really frustrating if you're working with a producer and they show up 30 seconds before you want to go live. You want to be able to meet with the announcers, and you want to be able to say, all right, who's doing what? You want to get yourself set up. You want to get your score sheet. We'll talk about a little bit more about score sheets later, but you want to get that set up so that your score sheet mirrors the scoreboard. And sometimes you will get rosters that are the opposite of the scoreboard, and that is tremendously frustrating. Now, it's been my experience, I've learned recently that that is a fairly easy fix for officiating, especially the scoreboard operator will probably reverse the scoreboard rather than having rather than printing out a whole new set of rosters to make the rosters match the scoreboard. It's easier to match the scoreboard to the rosters, to the pre-existing rosters that have already been printed. And if you bring that to someone's attention, it will make your job a lot easier. But if that can't happen, if you have rosters that are opposite the scoreboard, set your stat sheet up to mirror the scoreboard rather than to mirror the rosters that you have in front of you. And you just remember that you're going to have to do some crazy mental gymnastics when you work with the rosters, maybe even tear your roster sheet in half and put it the right way. So get yourself set up, get yourself a pile of index cards if that's what you're going to be using to pass notes. Some setups have a headset where the producer can talk directly with the announcers. The producer's voice doesn't go out on the broadcast, but the people who are on the call can hear the producer. That is my favorite setup when I'm the producer because I don't like to write really fast. I find it affects my legibility. But sometimes that's all you can do is pass notes. Sometimes you don't even get a headset, and sometimes all you can do is pass notes without, like you're writing down laboriously, that's 4 lead jams in a row, and you don't even know that the announcers on the broadcast have said, and that's 4 lead jams in a row while you're still writing it. Frustrating. You do what you can in a situation where you don't have a headset. So you want to coordinate with your technical production person when you get there. Chad Newt and Leslie Nope and Lane County Concussion They're all really very good at what they do. I'm sure there's other production companies out there that I've worked with. They're all dedicated to getting it right and to making sure that the best possible product goes out, which is so, I don't know. We're all volunteers. I'm always amazed by the dedication that people put into the jobs that they're supposed to do. So coordinate with them, find out what their names are so that the announcers can give them shout outs, what their roles are going to be. Who do I go to if the batteries run out? What do we do if the headsets fail? Find out who you need to talk to and when, and find out what your resources are. Is there going to be data that's available to you in game? Are you going to get, is the scoreboard going to be relayed on a screen? Is the broadcast itself going to be relayed on a screen? Where are those screens going to be? Get familiar with your resources so that you can use those to help you produce the call. One of the best things to do when you're producing is simply point at the scoreboard if there's a change in the score. Point at the score that's changed. Point at the time if there's been an adjustment to the time. One of the easiest ways to communicate non-verbally with the announcers during a broadcast is just by pointing at the resources that you have. If there's a penalties tracker as a resource, if there's a computerized screen that keeps track of penalties, that'll be a benefit. That'll be a blessing to you to have. So find out what your resources are and get familiar with them. Also coordinate with the technical production team, how they want to be identified. Like you were watching the JRDA championships on twitch.tv, brought to you by WFTDA TV, or you're watching the MRDA championships brought to you by Lane County Concussion. Whatever the vehicle is and the platform is, the people who are running the show will have the best way of phrasing how you want them to bring that in and out. Write that down for the announcers so that the announcers can just read it off an index card when it's time to do a station break. And then you will always get the station break correct. When the announcers show up, I'm always assuming that the producer is going to be the first one there. Or if you show up and the announcers are already there, coordinate with them. There's lots of things that you want to go over. You want to find out what time do you want to go live, what time, and this pertains either to a house call or a broadcast. What time do we want to start pumping the crowd? What time do we want to start working the mics? Or what time do we want to start, doing our little bits and going over the rosters, taking the fans into the game on a broadcast? Go over with those announcers. Okay, so which of you is going to do the intro? What's going to do is the outro? What is the outro? Are we throwing to a halftime act? Is there going to be a raffle? If it's a house call, are we going to throw to the master of ceremonies? If it's a broadcast call, how much? Let's work out. Let's say 3 minutes. Come back in, with 3 minutes before the second half, and we'll do some statistical analysis. So you find out with them what their roles are going to be. Do they want to do a strict, you do the play-by-play, I'll do the color? Are they going to have a conversation about Derby and just kind of find their way? And what is my role going to be? What is it that you want from me as your producer? Is there any particular data that you want me to get you? And also try not to be too redundant with the resources. If they're looking for penalties and you have a penalty tracker, we'll be like, look, you have a penalty board. That said, there are some pre-printed cards you can make, or you can try and work out hand signals as long as you work them out with the announcers before the game. Like if there's a penalty on the jammer, you point to the side of your helmet that the cut track was on the jammer. Or if it's on the pivot, you work out that it was a pivot. If it's a high score, that's the high score, just her team. High score for her team, or that's the high score for both teams. If you have these predetermined hand signals, you can also write out cards, index cards that say highest jam, and you just hold that up, or 2-minute jam, and you can hold that up, and then appropriate number of fingers next to it, like that's our third 2-minute jam. That's our fourth 2-minute jam. Also a very good idea to write all the sponsored assets down on an index card and keep that on the table. Like this is the Rydell Skates jammer line, or they're going to the 5-on-5 penalty box. Write all that information down and have it just an index card sitting in front of the two broadcast announcers. Another resource that you're going to want to make sure you have are the rosters. Ideally, there will be 3 rosters. If I'm envisioning a 3-person broadcast right now, ideally, there will be 3 rosters. The 2 broadcasters and the producer each get their own. If there's only 2, the producer has to have at least access to a roster. They might not have to have their own. One way to do it would be to put one roster between, the first announcer, the second announcer, and then the second roster in between the second announcer and the producer. Also, you're going to find out where you want to sit, who wants to be next to me, who doesn't want to be next to me. Is it okay if I whisper data to you, or are you going to want it written down on index cards or notes? Before the game starts, you want to get those rosters. And Mary Cass, can you put up the team rosters from that was it Rose City game that I said? Yeah, the Rose City Gotham game at Victorian. There we go. And you're going to want to actually physically bring those rosters out and find a bench staff, a manager or a coach from each team, and you want to go over the uniform numbers. Are these the correct uniform numbers for these skaters? I want to make sure that we pronounce everybody's name correctly. So let's go through pronunciation. I want to get everybody's pronouns. I want to find out who the captain and the alternate are. And I also want to get the names of the coaches and bench staff. And you write all of that down. That is something that maybe you could get help with. You could delegate to the other announcers. Hey, you go get Gotham, you go get Rose City, I'll go get the announcers. And working as a team, you could all get that information and then collaborate on it. If you can, if the teams know, you can confirm their records. Hey, I have you at 17-2 this year. They often don't know. But if you have an opportunity, or they do know, you can confirm their records with them. Then ask them if they have any shout outs. And this is also for house or broadcast, probably more for broadcast. Anybody listening back home you want to give a shout out to, especially at a tournament. Most teams will be traveling to the tournament, so they won't have a lot of fans in the stands that they want to give shout outs. Birthdays, anybody just published their doctoral thesis. If they say we want to give a sponsor to, 808 roller skates, that might be something you need to clear with the THA. If 808 roller skates is not a tournament sponsor, the teams might not be able to do that. If you look on the roster that I have over on the Gotham side at the very bottom, it says Maven. That's because they wanted to give a shout out to their injured teammate, Misty Maven, who was watching the game back in New York City. And so that's why that good job, Mary Cass, with the circling on the give it up for my producer, Mary Cass, making me look good. We are a team. Producers and announcers are a team. Anyway, also the same thing that you're doing with the skaters, you also want to do with the officials, confirm the pronunciation of their names, confirm their pronouns. You're going to want the name of the head referee, the head NSO, the alternate referee, and the jam timer. You want the alternate referee because you're going to be coordinating with that person, probably going to be coordinating with that person when there's official reviews or extended official timeouts. And it's always nice to give a recognition. Okay, this just in from our alternate referee, Jamboree. The Queens is challenging the points. You're also going to want to know the name and gender of the gender pronouns of the jam timer for 2-minute jams. Be like, only Ref in Peace knows when this jam will end. Only he can stop the clock now. And that might be the only time I can conceive where you would use a referee's pronoun, but you want to get it right if you do have to use it. So make sure that you confirm that with the officials. Also, while you're meeting with the officials, figure out with them how you're handling official reviews or handling extended official timeouts. Like why the fans at home are going to want to know on the broadcast, why are we waiting 3 minutes? What's going on? And you say, well, there's a scoreboard issue, or brief power outage, or there's blood on the track in turn number 2. Whatever the reason is, you should be able to coordinate with the alternate referee, have them come over and give the producer an explanation that can be passed along to the viewers at home or to the fans in the stands. I feel like I'm forgetting something right here. Here's what I'm forgetting. Some tournaments don't want you interacting with the teams at all before their games, and they don't want you interacting at all with the referees before their games. They're like, look, we've taken care of this. This information was to have been provided to you before the game. Work with the information you have, and don't bother these skaters before their games. Don't bother the officials before their games. If that's the tournament rule, then that's the tournament rule. Then you go with that. If it's unclear, and in my anecdotal experience, unless I'm told not to do it, the officials appreciate when you do it, the skaters appreciate when you do it. And it's all about getting it right. We're on team getting it right. Now, before we get to the next page, a little bit on that. Whoever sponsors the tournament or whoever sponsors the game that you're announcing or producing for, you are an ambassador for them, and you owe them some sort of duty to not bash them, not denigrate, to speak highly of them, to speak generally favorably of them. The same goes if it's a tournament, if it's a team, whatever, you want to be an ambassador for the sport. On the other hand, you're also, in a sense, a journalist. You're a broadcaster. You're bringing live sport to an audience, and you have a responsibility to be honest and genuine with the audience. And you can do both. You can walk that tightrope. You can say, boy, there's been a lot of stoppages of play. The officials might really have a lot to talk about without saying, boy, this officiating crew is sloppy. You can still point out that the reason why this game is dragging on is because of the officials, but do it in a way that says that the officials are trying to get everything right, and that builds up the officials rather than makes it a complaint about the officials. Anyway, we're all part of the larger team, which is we all want to get it right. We all want the winning team to win. We all want the losing team to lose. We want the fouls to be assessed fairly and recorded accurately, and we all really are on team getting it right. Okay, I'm done with this page. Do we have any questions? Want to take a little bit of a break? What do we want to do?
We don't want to take too much of a break, but if anyone has questions, you can unmute yourself or post a question in the chat if you have that option. We had also used the broadcast announcers as resources. They can help with names, pronouns, etc. Except broadcast, I meant house. Oh, okay. Yeah. That came from Lippy.
Yeah, very good observation that if you have two producers, if you have a house producer and a broadcast producer, one thing I would recommend is having those two people sit next to each other during the game so that you can simultaneously track stats and help each other out with the information that you're giving your respective announcers. And it also definitely lightens the load in terms of you can meet with this team, you can meet with that team, you can meet with the officials, you can make sure everybody has coffee. No, don't. It's never your job to get anybody coffee.
It's never your job, but I tell you what, DJ Ito is always happier when I do.
You make friends.
Make friends with the DJ. That's another thing that I do. All right. Yeah, I'm going to mute myself and we can move on. Should I go back to the outline?
Yeah, go back to the outline, please, and we're going to go up to the next. We're going to go on to page 3 where it says during the bout. Now, if you thought you had a lot to do before the bout, and that's a pretty lengthy list of stuff that you have to do before the bout, during the bout is just as hard. During the bout, you are going to be constantly hyper-focused. Your head is going to be on a swivel a lot of the time. In the support role, and being part of the team and making sure that the broadcast can be the best it can be, one of the things you're going to have to do is troubleshoot things that happen in the middle. If all of a sudden a mic's not working or a headset becomes unplugged or something of a technical nature goes wrong, you're the first line of what do I do? They're going to come to you. You probably don't know how to fix it. I know for sure that I don't know how to fix it. I don't have the technical experience, but that's why I've met before the bout with Leslie Knope. That's why I've met before the bout with Chad Newt. So I can say, help, what do we do? We have an issue. And so that I can get back to supporting the announcers in a more traditional producer role. But you are definitely, as a producer, going to be called upon to fix technical difficulties in a crisis. And that's that's going to be priority over your stat tracking. That's going to be priority over everything you do, because if you're tracking the best stats in the world, but the broadcast isn't going out, it's not doing anybody any good. So that's why I listed that first, even though it's not your primary job. It's the thing that's going to take priority over everything if something's not working. Know the penalty calls and relay the penalty calls. You're going to have a head on a swivel. I often say that I miss a lot of really great roller derby when I'm producing, because I'm not watching the skaters, I'm watching the refs. I often consider producing or even calling a game being a penalty wrangler with a microphone. You see a whistle, you look for the hand gesture. You say, okay, that's a track cut on. And it's, to my mind, perfectly acceptable to say whoever's leaving until somebody leaves the track. Or you can stall. That's a track cut on red 5, and look at your stat sheet. Oh, that's whoever red 5 is on your rosters. But know the hand signals. Know what the penalty calls are, and just relay the hand signals. You don't have to write them out unless your fellow announcers don't know the hand signals and are consistently getting it wrong, calling a misconduct and insubordination, or calling a leg block, skating out of bounds, or blocking out of bounds. The hand signals have changed for the penalties. Make sure you're always up to date on them. Know what the codes and cues are. And I have included in the outline there's a little cheat sheet. The WFTDA, the Women's Flat Track Derby Association, has meeting and officiating cues, codes, and signals PDF, which is a single page, has all the penalties on it, and it has all the penalty codes as well. So know your calls, know your penalty calls. And then the next thing we're going to do is stat tracking. So let's go over to a couple of things to do here. Let's go to one of the blank score sheets. There are 2 versions of score sheets. Perfect. That's the one we're looking at right now. And that is one that I developed in conjunction, well, both of them were ones that we're looking at are ones that I developed in conjunction with Al Capone, because she wants to be able to track stats, but the one I use makes her eyes bleed because it looks too much like graph paper. And she likes to be able to write out names. She likes to have at least some words on the page as well as numbers. So this is the version that Al Capone uses. And you will notice that it has 30 jams. The jams are pre-numbered, and it is divided into columns that are for jammer and star pass in the same column. So if there's a star pass, you just write it in that same column. The L box is whether or not there's lead. The box is whether or not the jammer went to the penalty box. In that, you write the penalty code. And the points, you write down the number of points. If there was a star pass, you make a slash. You know, jammer 1 got 4 points and then passed the star, and then the new jammer also got 2 points. So you would put the total as 6, or whatever the game total is. That's a running game total, but you would put a 4 and a 2 if there was a star pass, or if there was no star pass, you would put however many points the jammer scored. Can we click over to the different format, the still blank score sheet, the one that's more grid-like?
Yes, just give me a second because
Okay.
I need to retrieve it. Ha ha ha.
Yep.
I need to do that. This is why we did this as our first webinar, because we're working out all the kinks yet. So I'm gonna stop my share for a sec.
You're doing a great job.
Woo! Okay, so there we go. Hang on. Uno momento, por favor. Your call is important to us. All right. This should be correct then. Let me bring my share back up.
Yes, perfect.
Ha!
And then this is one document, but it's got 2 pages. It has the first page is the first period, and the second page is the second period. I print them double-sided out of some sort of sense of environmental consciousness. You'll notice the information is the jammer and the star pass column is not a consolidated column. And in this case, lead is in between them. On the other one, the lead was to the left of the jammer star pass column. Here, lead is immediately to the left of the jammer. To my mind, I worked it out this way because the jammer's going to get lead before they're going to pass the star, before they're going to get the penalty box, and the points come at the end. So at least to my mind, when I created this sheet, there was a flow to the progression of the columns. So this is a blank canvas on which to record roller derby. There is, in the upper right-hand corner and the upper left-hand corner, spaces for you to make entries. I also like to take advantage of the space where it says roller derby score sheet above that to write the date, to write maybe the time of the bout, to write the event I'm at, to write any other identifying information about the bout in case you want to use it as a later resource. Go back and say like, oh, I remember I called the game when they matched up at Loch Lassie, Georgia W. Tush. And in fact, I have that score sheet right there. And that will add some color to your calls or help you add color to other producers' calls. I also, in the upper right-hand corner, write everybody's name, write the name of the people who are on the mic, and write the name of the technical person who's handling getting the broadcast out through Twitch or through some of the other streaming companies, Nerd Derby, that are out there. So this is how I'm saying you want to set your score sheet up to match the scoreboard. If Gotham is on the left of the scoreboard, then put Gotham on the left. If Rose City's on the left of the scoreboard, then put Rose City on the left. And then put a slash and what color they're wearing. This will help you keep track of, okay, I'm making the entry in the right column. So in this particular instance, I'm going to say we're going to put Rose City on the left in purple and Gotham in white. And then just for each jam, now the jam columns are pre-numbered. Now here's a little background about this score sheet. I did not invent this score sheet. I helped perfect a previous score sheet that was given to me by Double H, one of the best producers of all time, producing legend. Hats off to Derby legend Double H. This is a variation on a score sheet that Double H handed out at the 2017 Division II, back when they had Division II championships. This was the D2 champs score sheet, but on that score sheet, they did not have the jam column pre-numbered. You were to write that in, and if there was a star pass, you were to skip a line. And if there was a star pass for either team, you were still supposed to skip a line. And I thought that was tedious. And I thought if we could just include create a star pass column, then we could pre-number the jams and it would make it a lot easier. And I think that's the key to this. I also want to point out, this is my favorite stat sheet. Val Capone has her variation of this stat sheet that she likes to use, but there are other fantastic score sheets out there. And there are people who do it freehand. There are people who track stats. Kent the politician will use a little notebook. Mochismo also will use a sheet of loose leaf to stat track. Val Capone, when she first started, was using loose leaf paper to track stats and creating columns on that. Cecil B. Puff Daddy has a different score sheet. There are all kinds of different score sheets that are out there. I'm not saying mine's the only way to go, and mine definitely has limitations. Mine is not great at calculating jammer percentages. It's really good at identifying streaks and identifying high scores and identifying anomalies, but it is not good at identifying percentages. So if you have a score sheet like that, preach the gospel of your score sheet. This is the one that I've created and that works best for me. Just in terms of setting it up, I also put more column space on the left side than on the right side. That is so that it can be 3-hole punched and stored in a binder for later. I do use the sides of the columns for entries. Let's take a look at that completed score sheet. Let's look at the first period of that Rose City Gotham from Thin Air Throwdown, and I'll go over some of how to use the score sheet. There we go. Excellent. So you will see we're looking at the first period, and I have written Thin Air Throwdown, Day 2, Game 4, September 21st, 6 p.m. I'm working with Tchaikovsky and Papow, and Leslie Nope is going to be the person who's handling all the technical aspects of it. And then in terms of just recording lead, I use a check mark to indicate which team got lead. As you will see, the check marks start out pretty strong on the Gotham side, but by the end of the day, they're pretty strong on the Rose City side. One thing to take notice of here in jam number 1, no points were scored by Rose City. Gotham put up 8. So I put 8 points in for their points, and I put 8 points in the score. And I circled both of those entries. The reason why you circle an entry in the points column is when it's the highest score of the game for that team so far. So I know that Gotham leads the highest score in jam number 1, usually happens, is 8 points. And I circled the number 8 in the score column to indicate that we have a score change. Now I know that it's not necessarily a lead change. I've had this debate with lots of people as to whether or not a score change and a lead change are the same thing. But it does. We've gone from not having a score to having a score. So I'm going to circle that 8 there to indicate the score change. Drop down to the third jam, jam number 3. This is the first time Rose City picks up lead, and it's the first time they put points on the board. They put 4 points on the board, so I'm going to circle that. That's their new team high score. You'll see that that team high score gets matched in jam number 5, and then surpassed in jam number 7, and then gets surpassed again way down in jam number 16 with a 20-point jam. Also in jam number 16, Gotham puts 10 points on the board, and that's their highest jam as well. So both teams set their highest scoring jam of the game in that jam, so both are circled. Going back over looking at that score column in jam number 7, you'll see that Rose City's score, total score of 20 is circled. That's because they have tied the game. We've gone from having a lead by Gotham to no longer having a lead. And then in the very next jam, when Rose City puts up 8, I've circled the 28 because that's another score change. We've gone from not being tied, or we've gone from being tied to having a lead. So I've circled the 28 again, and I think that that is the last score change. Yeah, I'm cheating. I'm looking at the second side of the page, but there is no further. So that's the last time that the lead changed hands. Really, you could say that there was only one lead change, that Gotham had a lead and then Rose City had a lead change, or you could say that there were 3, which is what I would say, but that's semantics. Either way, you're communicating the data and you're recording the data so that you could get the, you can either write out a card or a sticky note to pass to the announcers or not. You'll see at the end of jam number 8, there is a line that goes starting in the jam column all the way over to the Gotham side. That is because Gotham called a team timeout. You're going to mark team timeouts or team official reviews with a solid line, and then use the margin to indicate which timeout it was. It was Gotham's first timeout, so I wrote timeout number 1, and I indicated that the clock was stopped at 16:51, unless that's a 57, but it's close enough for government work. The clock was stopped at 16:50 some seconds left to play for the first time in the first period at jam number 8. And it was after Gotham called the lead, called the timeout after Rose City established lead for the first time. Then Gotham called a second team timeout after jam number 15. You'll see jam 16 and 17, both of those are a dashed line, and they go all the way across. I use a dashed line to indicate official timeouts. So that a broken line is a stoppage of play caused by a team. A dashed line is a stoppage of play caused by the officials. And then there's a explanation for the second official timeout was number 365 was injured. So some interesting things going on around jams 13 through 17. So yeah, if we could zoom in, or you'll see in jams 13 that neither team put points on the board, that there's a 0 there. And that 0 is highlighted. That is the first time that neither team scored. That's a first mutually scoreless jam, and I indicate that with highlighter. You see again that it happened in jam 15. Neither team put points on the board in jam number 15, so I highlighted that as well. Then you'll see in jam number 17, the Smacktivist got through the pack but was not lead jammer because they got through on a no pass, no penalty, and actually picked up 4 points. The other jammer was sent to the penalty box on a high block. You can see that is I'm writing the penalty in the penalty code. I'm writing the penalty code in the column that says box. That's when the jammer goes to the penalty box, and then you'll know why they went to the penalty box if you write the penalty code there. Don't just use a hash mark. Use the penalty code if you can. If you didn't see the penalty, put a question mark there and just admit, I didn't see the call. If it's something you can fix at halftime, if there's a resource on the table that's going to populate shortly and be like, oh, there it is, it's a back block. Oh, there it is, it's a track cut. Use the resources that you have. But if in real-time notation, if you didn't see the call, but you did see the jammer go to the box, put a question mark there. But then the smacktivist, after number 340, who is that on my roster? After Bonnie Thunders, how do I not know who 340 is? Shame on you, Bobby. After Bonnie Thunders goes to the penalty box on the high block, smacktivist enters play, picks up 4 points, but then gets hurt. And that is why the official timeout happens at 3 minutes and 38 seconds. And that is why I put injury to number 365. And that is why it wasn't a 2-minute jam, but I have circled it as a 2-minute jam. So maybe the injury came after 2 minutes. That's entirely possible, that it was a 2-minute jam because neither of them had lead, and that the injury came at the very end of the 2 minutes. At any rate, you'll see those jam columns circled in jams 16, 17, and 20. Those are 2-minute jams. In jams 16 and 20, you will see that the lead, there's a check mark. I use a check mark to indicate lead. And in jams 16 and 20, that check mark is turned into an X. That means lead was awarded, but then lost. In this case, because the jammer went to the penalty box for a back block in jam 16 or for a forearm in jam 77. Both of those penalties committed by Lauren Much. There's also another way that you could lose lead, and that would be you had lead and you took the star cover off. And I guess you could put that in the star pass box or make some sort of notation that indicates cover off, either in the lead column or in the star pass column. If they took the cover off and lost lead but didn't pass the star, if they took the cover off and lost lead, I think the star pass column would explain it, at least historically. Now you look at the bottom of the page, if we could scroll down just a little bit more. There are columns at the end where it says totals, and you just add up the columns. It's easy as pie. This will help you get your stat tracking done in the second half. 11 lead jams for Rose City. There were 7 for Gotham. Each team passed the star once. In jam number 18, the star was passed to Gal of Frey by Rose City. And in jam number 14, Gotham, the smacktivist passed the star to Yeti or Not, Here I Come. And you write the star pass recipient's number. Also, looking at jam number 14, you'll see that smacktivist did not score any points, but that Yeti scored 4 points as the jammer, and that's why that /0/4 is there. When Bonnie passed the star to Gallifrey, neither of them scored any points. So in jam number 18, it's a 0/0. Add up the columns. Each team had 1 star pass. Where it says box, these are jammer penalties. So Rose City had 5 jammer penalties. Gotham only had 1 jammer penalty. And then you tally up the jams that had no score. And you look at the highlighter that you have. I have 3, but that is wrong. I had originally scored jam 6 as no score, but Gotham got 2 points, and I forgot to correct it in that tallies column. No lead. There were 2 jams with no lead, and there was 3 2-minute jams. And you get that just from analyzing the score sheet that you have. Okay, let's go back to the outline. So that is stat tracking, and everything that I've talked you through. There is another handout attachment, which is the instructions for the roller derby, for this roller derby score sheet. How to make entries where, when to circle things, when someone sets a high score, when there's a 2-minute jam, things to highlight. And that is stat tracking. Now, now that you have these stats, how are you going to get them to the announcers that are either on the house caller or on the broadcast? Hopefully, ideally, at least to my mind, you'll have a headset where you can communicate with them, where your voice isn't going out on the broadcast, but the broadcasters are hearing what you're saying. That's, to me, the easiest. I think I've only had that twice. I think I had that at Men's Roller Derby World Cup, and I don't even remember. ECDX, we might have had that 1 year. That, to my mind, is the best way to go, but frequently not the case. If you're fellow announcers are cool with you whispering stuff, then that's to my mind, an easier way to go than writing stuff out on note cards by hand. But probably you were going to have to write stuff out by hand, and that's why having those prearranged note cards that say high score or new jammer or 2-minute jam, having just cards written out. Another good pre-printed one to have that says sponsors. You need to remind, as the producer, you need to remind the announcers to track their sponsors. I like to, in terms of division of labor, I would much prefer to track the stats and not have to track the ads. And so I would like to delegate that. I try to delegate that to one of the people who's on the call. Listen, I've set up the ads for you. This is another thing that you can do before the game. Go through the announcements, set them up, and just be like, read one page, turn it over. Go put it on the bottom of the pile upside down, go to the next set of ads, read that page until you're done with ads on that page, turn it over, put it on the bottom of the pile. So that when you're looking at nothing but blank space, you know that you're looking at the back of the pile and that you've read every ad. That's a great way to track stats that the producer doesn't have to do, that the person who's reading the ads can do. Track what ads they've read as they read them, just by keeping the ads in an order on a page. And as producer, you can help them do that by getting the ad copy set up for them in advance. And again, reminder about that special index card that has the sponsored assets, the 5-on-5 penalty box, the 5-stride skate shop, pivot line, and use those. Remind the announcers, if they're not using the sponsored assets, tap that card. Hey, you have sponsored assets. People are paying money to have their name associated with this jammer line, pivot line, penalty box, scoreboard. And so if just keep the announcers in line. If they're not being in line, just tap on that card. If you have social media as one of your assets, remind the announcers to keep an eye on the social media platforms. Another thing that's going to happen, this is more likely to happen during if you're producing a house call than if you're producing a broadcast, is someone will come up to you and be like, hey, we found a driver's license. Can you announce that so-and-so lost their driver's? We found an iPhone. Can you announce the whole, can you announce? That you need to be the buffer for the announcers so that the announcers can concentrate on their call. I'm not saying that, and frequently what that means is you will find out who's in charge of bout production and be like, go see Kate Sarasa. She's in charge of bout production for today. And being the buffer does not mean that you have to deal with the situation. Deal with the situation if you can. If it's an obvious logical thing like, hey, can you give it a shout out on this lost driver's license? Yeah, you probably don't need to send them to bout production for that. But can you announce this political statement that our team wants to do about the rights of Indigenous people? Yes, probably you will announce that, but I would not want to go and do that on my own authorization. I would want the authorization of someone in charge of bout production or someone in charge of the tournament head announcer. I want someone above my pay grade approving that before I hand it to the announcers. And I also want to give it to an announcer and say, look, take your headset off and read this. Let the other person fly solo on the call for a few seconds. Don't stumble on this. Don't trip on this. Make sure that this is written in copy that you can read, because they're going to ask you to read this. That said, if you make mistakes, if you stumble over things, if you find that either if you've made mistakes in your stat tracking and can own them quickly and correct them and be on team getting it right without dwelling on it, then make the correction or indicate to the broadcasters or the house announcers, I've made a mistake. I said that it was Gotham's timeout when in fact it was Rose City's timeout. So my bad, make that correction and move on. Don't dwell on correcting mistakes. There was a situation I had where one of the broadcast announcers saw a 9-point jam and thought it was the highest jam of the game. And it wasn't even close to the highest jam of the game. It was the 6th highest jam in the game. And I couldn't figure out a way to communicate to them. Like, they were like, Bobby, is that the highest jam of the game? I'm like, no. So I tried to hand them a card indicating, what the highest jam in the game was. But in a situation like that, rather than taking 5 minutes to figure out what the right information is, just, no, that wasn't the high score of the game, and let's move on. Finally, if you're producing a bout and you find that one announcer is just completely steamrolling the other, or that someone appears inundated or out of their league, help them out. Maybe say, to the other, slip a note to the other announcer, let this guy get a word in edgewise, or slip a note to the other person saying, here's some things for you to say. Here's some color for you to say. Here's something interesting for you to add to the bout. Now, one of the thankless things during the game is they're not going to use everything you give them. They're just not. And you can't take it personally. You're here to support them. And if you keep giving them gem after gem after, that's 6 lead jams in a row. That's their 7th lead gem in a row. That's only the 4th 2-minute jam of the game. And they're not using it. Don't take it personally. Their announcers are going to have their own style of calling the game. And you are going to be, you've hopefully worked out with them before you even started what they're looking for, what kind of stats they're looking for. So hopefully you can be feeding them what they want. And the bottom line is you're there to do a job, and they don't have to use everything they give you. And that's fine. It's their, on the bottom line, they're the ones who are signing in, signing out, and putting their stamp on the broadcast. But you're putting your stamp on the broadcast as well. Keep giving them information. Keep supporting them. And that leads me to my segue about, you thought it was busy during the bout. Wait till what happens at halftime. But let's take a little break and see if we have any questions right now.
Any questions right now? You can come off mute. We've got, what, about a page and a half left, Bobby?
Yeah, I have what to do during halftime, and then what to do after the bout. And what to do after the bout is much easier. What to do during halftime is probably, what to do during the bout and what to do during halftime are probably the most full portions of the webinar.
Cool. Well, I'm not seeing any questions. I'm not hearing anyone. So let's
All right.
keep going.
Give me a second to take a sip of a cool beverage, and then we'll progress.
Yeah, which all of us know that. I think plenty of us that are actually watching you do that are going, wow, you're taking a sip of Coca-Cola
Yeah,
while you're speaking? I can't do it. I'd burp on the mic.
Yeah, know what works for you and do what works for you. As a producer, you're not really in charge of the health of your fellow announcers, but if you throw a handful of Ricola on the counter, they're going to love you. But know what works for you and do what works for you. I find that Diet Coke works just fine for me. Oh, one thing about tracking stats. Here is a hack that I have used. Work in an erasable medium. Work in something that can be erased. There are highlighter pencils and there are highlighter pens that is erasable highlighter. I don't want to give any particular endorsement, but the guy who flies the plane, there's a company that has the same name, and they make a fantastic erasable highlighter and pen. And I work almost exclusively in that medium. Pencil, I suppose, would work fine. I don't really like mechanical pencils because I don't find that they keep an edge well. On the other hand, regular pencils lose their edge too frequently. So for my dollar, erasable pens from the guy who flies the plane and erasable highlighters from the guy who flies the plane are the way to go.
I've had some producers that their notes are actually, they use a whiteboard for their notes.
Yes, Amy Jo Moore, amazing, using the whiteboard. And again, saying my system is not the only way to go. RPG, I think it's out of Austin Anarchy, has a computer system that is a dream. Yeah. But she can operate it single-handedly. I can operate maybe 80% of it, but I tried to do that at Beach Champs in 2018. And it's an amazing system, and it gives the announcers so many resources. It gives jammer percentages. It gives jammer on jammer matchups. It's like being in the cockpit of a 747. The amount of data that you have to work with as an announcer, and it's an incredible resource. But she's a superstar. She's a wizard, and she has she tracks all the penalties from skater, not just jammer penalties, everybody going in and out of the box. She's got the whole thing right there, and she's doing it as a producer, and anything you could possibly want is on those screens. Brad example, another good example of someone who does not do paper, has a laptop program. I'm not saying that my way is the only way to do it, not by a long shot. If you've got a system that works for you, great. And it's rather find a system that helps you track stats and work with the system and always be improving your system. I didn't come up with the idea of dashed lines and dotted lines and recording timeouts until I'd been using this particular form of status sheet for about 5 or 6 months. So it's other iterations. Like I didn't end up putting the no score, no lead 2 minute. Those were evolutions of the status sheet. All right, let's get going now. We're talking about halftime, and we talked about the score sheet before, how you can just add up those totals in the columns. And that's a great way to delegate stats or to do stats. Another thing you can do, halftime is one of the busiest times for the producers. And for the people who've been calling the game, they can take a breather. They can take a little bit of a breather. But if they can help the producer, while the producer is doing math, if they can help the producer get penalty information, if you don't have a resource, if you don't have some sort of computer screen that's showing you that information, if you can go to the penalty trackers, the NSOs, who are the penalty trackers, and just take a screenshot. Hey, can I take a screenshot of your penalties? And that way, when you come back, you'll know the overall number of penalties for each team, and you'll also know which individual skaters have the most penalties. And if it's particularly fouly and you're not going to have time to go through everybody, then you maybe do the top three, your top 3 foulers for each team. This person has 5, this person has 4. Nobody on Queens has more than 2, however you want to phrase it. And then another thing you want to do, so for lead jammer percentages, can we throw up that Rose City Gotham score sheet, first period, the one we looked at before? I just go through that and I go, okay, 77 is 0 for 1, 77 is 0 for 2, 77 is 1 for 3, 77 is 2 for 4. And every time I see jammer number 77 in that column, then I'm going to indicate that on my score sheet. And then if you pop over to the score sheet, the Rose City Gotham score sheet, not score sheet, rosters. Boom, look at that. You'll see that in the margins I put that Lauren Much is 4 for 7. Brute is 1 for 3. Bonnie Thunders is 4 for 6. Beyond Thunderdame is 2 for 3. The Smacktivist is 2 for 5. Space Invaders 2 for 4. And you write all that information down on the score sheet, on the rosters off of the score sheet. And there's probably a better way to do it. I'm sure that RPGs and Brad Example's way of using the computer is a wizard with that. But to my mind, the best way to do it is just to look at the score sheet and say 77 is over 1, 77 is over 2, 77 is 1 for 3, and go through the score sheet like that. Then I repeat the same process for the points. 77 has no points. 77 still has no points. 77 has 12 points. 77 has 14 points. On and on through the things, through the score sheet, so that you get the points for each person. It looks like from the score sheet we're looking at here, I may have delegated that to somebody else, because I don't have those scores indicated, or it might have been information that was on a screen somewhere that I didn't need to do because it was an asset, something that the announcers already had, so that they didn't need me to do. But you can see from that you just go through. Oh, another thing you can see on that score sheet while we have it up there, every time a jammer comes out to the jammer line, highlight their name. And that way you'll know how many different jammers they've had, and also when you're making your notations as to jammer percentages, you'll know what numbers to look for. And it's just a good visual representation. Both teams put 4 jammers out there on the line in this particular contest. Both teams, looks like Rose City did basically Lauren and then Bonnie, and then either Beyond Thunderdame or Brute. At least in the first half, or my percentages there are showing the first half. So that Lauren Much had 7 jams, Bonnie had 6 jams, and between Brute and Thunderdame, they had 6 jams. Over on the Gotham side, it was more of an even distribution, except that Kate Sarah got the lion's share, and then everybody else got 3, 4, or So you can dress up. Those are stats and trends that you can pass along to the announcers. It's also easy to tally from the score sheet how many total leads there have been per team, how many total jammer penalties there have been per team, how many star passes there have been per team. Your highest individual jams, those are going to be circled. So you have that information right there for you. Lauren Much led all scorers in an individual jam with 20 points, and Kate Sarah had 10 for Gotham, and those were both scored on the same jam. 2-minute jams, you've circled those, so those are easy to find. Jams with no lead, you've highlighted those, so those are easy to find. And jams with no score by either team, you've highlighted those as well. And all of a sudden, you have at least a minute's worth of stats that you can give the announcers that they can, when they come back from halftime, all right, it's 3 minutes till, we got some statistical analysis from Bobby Narco. I love it when, and I try to get the producer to do their own statistical analysis. I'd like to hand the mic over to Mary Kay, so she could take us through the stats that she's compiled from the first half. But, it's perfectly fine if it's too unwieldy to pass the headsets back and forth or to pass the mic back and forth to share your work. If you are the announcer, give credit to the person who compiled the stats, whoever they may be. And also, we talked about it earlier, you want to go over penalties overall per team and who are the highest skaters. During halftime, you want to make sure how we're doing on sponsorship reads. If you haven't had any stoppages of play, chances are you're going to need to start working them into your call, and that's when you're going to flash that index card that says sponsors over and over again. They're going to have to work them in between jams if there's not stoppages of play. As announcers, stoppages of play both kill a broadcast, but they help us do our jobs so well. That's the time that we rely on to do sponsorship reads. And if the sponsorship reads aren't getting done, as the producer, you need to prompt them. And halftime is a good time to review with them. Okay, how many have we done? How many pages have we flipped over? How many pages do we have left to go? Are we on good pace? Review the overtime rules. If it's a huge blowout, you probably don't need to know them, but go over the overtime rules, especially if it's a close game, with the house announcers, just in case you have overtime. You want to know what to be able to do. You don't want the announcers that you're working with on the broadcast to appear frozen on screen. You want to go over some of the basics. When do you want to go live for the second half? Who's taking us in? Who's taking us out? What are they taking us out to? Do we have a post-game interview? Do we want to set up the next game? Are we done for the day and have the first game tomorrow? Are we done for the tournament and want to welcome back to the tournament next year? Stay tuned to the Philadelphia Roller Derby website for when the next East Coast Derby extravaganza will be. Figure out how they want to go out and make sure that the information that the person going out has is accurate and at their fingertips. Also, just basically check in with the announcers who are on the call. How am I doing? Am I giving you too much information? Do you need more from me? Do you need less from me? And I've got announcers who will be like, please, you're giving me way too much. Respect that. I totally respect that. I'll back it off. I'll lay off the numbers and the quirky things that kind of make me, and I'll just give you more streaks. I'll just give you more, just throw you penalty calls and just give you more, focus more on the data. But I'm here for you. We're a team. I want this broadcast to be the best it can be, and my job on this team is to help you make the best possible call that you can. What do you need from me? And then the second half starts, and you do mostly the same thing that you did in the first half. You track those stats. You keep them on point with the ads. You keep them on point with the social media. Everything that you've done in the first half kind of carries over into the second half. Oh, one thing. Can we show the roller derby score sheet from Rose City, Gotham? Can we show the second period? I want to show you how I set up the second period. Okay. Nice, well done. So you will see at the top, Rose City in purple, Gotham in white, same as before. Underneath that, I have a 20 circled with 7-7 and jam 16. That's to remind myself that so far, up to this point in the game, Lauren Much leads all scorers with 20 points, and that was set in jam number 16. Over on the Gotham side, you'll see the circled number 10, 56/J16. That's to remind myself that from the first period, Kate Sarasara leads all Gotham scores with 10 points put on the board in jam number 16. Not leads all scores in terms of overall scores, the individual high jam. That's the individual high jam. You will see in the second half here, just generally looking, that Gotham was way more foul-y. The Gotham Jammers only made 1 trip to the penalty box in the first period, but made 5 trips to the penalty box in the second period. You could see from the circles that there were a couple 2-minute jams. There is no highlighter on this page. That means that there was no scoreless jams. There were mutually scoreless jams, and that means that there was no jam without a lead. And then if you could scroll down to very bottom, you see that on the first period, there's a line where it says first period, and I've entered all the stats from the first period, that there was 11 leads for Rose City in the first period, 1 star pass, and 5 trips to the penalty box. I have that first period under the second period. It's not quite logical. You would expect the first period to come first, but that's because you're going to add up the column, and then you're going to want to drop that entry. So that's the stats that you're adding up that's why I put the second period first, is because that's the bottom of that line that you're adding up. So the second period comes on top of the first period. I've transferred over the no score, the no lead, and the 2-minute tallies, and then there were 2 more 2-minute jams in the second half to bring it up to 5. Done the same, just adding up the columns. There was 1 star pass in the second half for Gotham. That once again went to Yeti or not, this time by Space Invader, and Rose City did not pass the star in the second half at all, so they ended up the game with 1 star pass. And you have your total game tallies there. If you want to do, at the end of the game, a final numbers crunch. So any questions about that? We're about to wrap it up. We're heading into the home stretch. We have the after the game section coming up. Anyone? Bueller? I'm gonna take another sip.
Bobby?
Yeah.
Hey, it's Darkwing. How's it going, man?
Darkwing! Yes, it's going really well. How about yourself?
Doing good. Hey, one thing I was hoping you could touch on, because I thought this helped a lot when we had our stuff in Denver, is, and I think this flows in with the production stuff, is having somebody across the track to relaying penalties.
Yeah, if you can do that, that's a great thing to do. It's not really if you're working at a tournament and you're not on a call, if you're not producing a call, but you're on the next one, you don't really feel like leaving the venue. A great thing to do, a great way to help out your fellow announcers, is to find a seat in the stands or a place on the track that is in the blind spot of the referees. That's caddy corner, that's across on a diagonal across from where the announcers are, where if an inside referee is making a call, they have their back to the announcers, and so those announcers can't see the call. Or if outside announcer has their back to the announcer, you're seeing the angle of the referee that the announcers are not, and then you can just relay calls. You can relay penalty calls, and not really a producer thing to do, but generally a swell thing to do, and will win you friends and admirers. And it's all about getting it right. It's all part of you getting it right. And shout out the guy that's doing that, or the gal that's doing that. Shout out the person that's out there throwing you. Oh, look, we have DJ Darkwing D throwing penalties to us from turn 2. Much love to DJ Darkwing D. He's indicating that penalty we couldn't see is actually a track cut on the jammer, or. And again, for situations like that, just use the penalty codes and then point at the side of your head. If it's the jammer, do a stripe across the top of your head. If it's the pivot, I haven't really come up with a sign for blocker yet. Maybe flex a muscle. Maybe flex your muscle if you want to be if you want to indicate that it's just a blocker. So the pivot's a stripe, jammer's a star, and a blocker maybe is a muscle. I don't know. But yeah, great input, DJ Darkwing D. Great to hear from you. Glad you're joining in. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Anybody else have anything? Are we still live? Did my phone?
Yeah, we're good. Just let's finish it out.
All right, let's take it on home right now. The last thing is what to do after the bout. And I already talked you through that final stats. If there's time permitting, crunch as many of the final stats as you can to work into the broadcast. If there's paperwork to be processed, a lot of tournaments especially want you to check off if ads have been done, or there's an ad tracking sheet, or if they're collecting the stat sheets, put the stat sheets wherever they go. Don't leave your workstation a mess. Bring your papers with you. If you don't want to keep them, throw them out. If somebody's not collecting them or saving them for a purpose, just get them out of there. If there's a tournament bracket, it's usually helpful to have the tournament bracket on the announcer's table. Fill it in. I'm going to say that that's the producer's job, is to fill in the tournament bracket. And when you get there, make sure that it's up to date if you can, and complete it. If it's not, leave your workstation in a better situation than you found it. If you get there and the bracket's not complete, complete the bracket. You know, somebody didn't do their job. That doesn't mean that that it's okay for you not to do it either. Let's get it right. Let's get the entries on the bracket that need to get done. Whatever, if there's paperwork to be collected, collect the paperwork. If that sponsored asset card can stay there, if the jammer line is going to remain the 5-stride skate shop jammer line, then leave that card there. Leave assets for your fellow announcers. Leave blank score sheets on the table if you can, but eliminate detritus. If you've used up a note, I crumple it up. When I take a note, I use both sides of the paper, and I'll cross out so that if I still have clean white space that I can write a note on, I'll use that. But once it's done, crumple it up. And because no one's going to unfold a crumpled note. But someone might think that if you just leave a note on a table that you're not done with, oh, that's 4 lead gems in a row. No, that was the first half. That's a note left over from the first half. So clear out your detritus as you go, and then at the end of the game, you will have less clutter. Make sure that you leave the workstation, unless you found the workstation pristine, leave it in a better condition than you found it.
All right.
Any questions on that part?
Any questions overall for Bobby about producing, or roles of the producer, or things that he didn't cover? Or, and again, you can type if you can't. We got no questions. Great info, Bobby.
Okay.
All right. So if nothing else, if you think of anything later, I'm going to be posting this onto YouTube. If nothing else, if you think of something later, or if someone else has a question, put it in the comment box, and that way we can comment first.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, we can input. We'll also be creating resources. These resources will be available. All of these stat sheets are in an open Google Drive, and I'll be posting that link in the comments in the YouTube page as well. So
can you scroll to the last page of the outline?
Yep. Hang on. Share. Oh, look at that.
There's just some thanks I'd like to give to some people. I'd like to start off with giving thanks to my most excellent producer for this webinar, Mary Chaos. You have been amazing and outstanding, getting the documents up on the screen whenever I've asked for them, and even writing and circling things. You're just awesome. I want to give credit to Val Capone, who really turned me on to stat tracking. I used to be intimidated by it. Now I do it even when I'm not the producer. Now I will track stats even when I'm calling a game. Tracking stats will make you a better announcer. It will make you more attentive to what's going on the track, and that will help you call. Double H, one of the best announcers, announcers and producers out there. Also Amy Jo, just a magician the way Amy Jo works the whiteboard. Mochismo, Kent the Politician, AK 40 Ounce, OC Diva, Vince Hannity, Tommy Standby, a load of sarcasm, all just wizards of tracking stats. I've learned so much from each and every one of them, from working with them, from seeing what they give me and seeing how they handle the producer job. At the head of the field in terms of stat tracking without paper and pen, I got in my experience, Brad Example and RPG, they are just fantastic with what they're able to accomplish without paper and pen using the computer. I want to give some shout outs to some people that I've met and worked with for the first time this year that are up and comers. Jim the Grim, DJ Darkwing D, who had phoned in earlier, and a junior out of Maine, Darth Molly, who is really keen on tracking stats and getting involved. preach the gospel of track and stats, and you will go far in roller derby. The job of a producer is a fun one, and you can all do it. I want to give love again to Mary Chaos, as well as my fellow members on the Association of Flat Track Derby board, Cosmic Camel Clash, Go-Go Boots, and PR Armageddon. And I want to give love to the Association of Flat Track Derby announcers for hosting this webinar.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. Again, all of these resources will be available. Sorry if it suddenly got loud. We're cooking lunch. Also, that Google Doc, I meant to say, I'm going to have it open. So if you have other resources that you would like to share, other stat sheets or anything, feel free to upload it to that folder. Thank you very much. You guys are awesome. And next month, we're going to be doing this again. It's going to be Saturday, December 7th. 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as soon as we have the official topic, let us know, but feel free to message us on the Facebook page or on Twitter and give us suggestions, okay? Thank you.
Until then, we wish you peace, love, and roller derby.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.